I used to be very distractible. I'm embarrassed to say, when I was with my daughter, I would be checking my phone. And it's not that the device is the problem. It's that I didn't intend to do those things. And yet here I was doing something I didn't want to do.
Let's talk about why it is important to tame the distraction, because it is a hard work and being distracted is a lot easier than focusing. It's fun to hang out with the smartphone and being distracted and just to spend time there. But why do we still have to care? Why do we still have to make intentional effort to tame distraction?
Well, I want to start by saying that I have a very different approach than I think other authors do and other books that people might have read that espouse for, whether it's digital minimalism or digital detoxing or stopping the cell phone use. The problem is not the technology, okay? And I don't want people to stop using the technology. That's not what I'm advocating for. So I can hear a lot of what you're asking about is, how do we stop using our smartphones so much? And I'm here to tell you that is not the problem. The problem is that we keep blaming the cell phone. But the problem is not here. The problem is here. And you will always find distraction, because people have always found distraction. We know that 2,500 years ago, Plato, the Greek philosopher, was talking about akrasia in the Greek, the tendency to do things against our better interest. So if people have been struggling with distraction for 2,500 years before TikTok and before the internet and before social media and before these websites and before all these distracting technology, the source of the problem can't be the technology. Furthermore, we need the technology. The technology does wonderful things for us. So blaming the technology is futile. The much better approach is to use these products and services in a way that serves you as opposed to hurts you. And the only way you can do that is by becoming indistractable. That's what Indistractable is all about. Indistractable starts with the definition of distraction. What is distraction? The best way to know what distraction is to know what distraction is not. What is the opposite of distraction? Most people will tell you, I don't want to be distracted, I want to be focused. And it sounds like in the translation of the Korean version, that's what they focused on, is focus. That's not exactly right. The focus should not be on focus. Rather, if you look at the opposite of distraction, the opposite of distraction is traction. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do. Things you do with intent. Things that move you closer to your values and help you become the kind of person you want. Those are acts of traction. The opposite of traction is distraction. Any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, away from your values, away from becoming the kind of person you want to become. The difference between traction and distraction is intent. As Dorothy Parker said, the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. We like to think, oh, Zuckerberg is doing it to us. The technology is doing it to us. It's someone else's fault. As opposed to, wait a minute, actually, I can use this in a way that serves me as opposed to hurts me. I can use this in a way that leads me towards traction. So if you put time on your calendar for going on your smartphone or watching Netflix or playing a video game, it's not distraction, it's traction, because it's what you said you were going to do with your time. Conversely, just because something is a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction. Again, we tend to moralize this stuff. Going on Facebook and video games, that's bad. But doing my work, that's good. No, that's not true. If it's not what you intended to do with your time, it's a distraction. I'll give you a perfect example. For years, I would get to work and sit down at my desk, and I would say, okay, I'm going to get started on my most important task here, that thing that I said I was going to do with my time. Here I go. I'm going to get started right now. But first, let me check some email. Right? Let me scroll that Slack channel. Even the stuff that was work-related wasn't what I said I was going to do with my time, and it's a distraction. So just because something is a work-related task doesn't mean it's not a distraction. That's the most dangerous kind of distraction, because you don't even realize it's happening. When you're putzing around on TikTok, you know that's not what you're supposed to be doing at work. But when you're checking email, when you really should be working on that big project that you're delaying, you justify it. Oh, it's a work-related task. It's okay. No. Anything that is not what you're doing with intent, in advance, decided in advance, is by definition a distraction. So traction, distraction. Now we've got the triggers. There's two kinds of triggers. We have external triggers. This is what we tend to blame, right? The pings, the dings, the rings, everything in our outside environment. And those can be a source of distraction, but they only account for about 10% of our distractions. 90% of our distractions begin from within. So the important thing is to not blame the technology or shame us for using the technology, but rather understanding that distraction, most of it begins from within. These are called internal triggers. Internal triggers are uncomfortable emotional states: boredom, loneliness, fatigue, uncertainty, anxiety, fearfulness. Once we understand that that is the real source of the problem, the inability to deal with these internal triggers, and that time management is pain management. I'll say it again, it's so important. Time management is pain management. If you don't understand the source of the problem, you'll keep blaming all this other stuff without actually getting to the root of the issue. The root of the issue is an impulse control problem. We don't know how to deal with discomfort. And so we escape it with distraction as opposed to pushing us forward towards traction. Now we've got the 4 steps. Number 1, master the internal triggers. That's the most important first step. And you have to master the internal triggers or they will become your master. Step number 2, we make time for traction. You can't say you got distracted unless you know what you got distracted from. So if you have a big open calendar with nothing on it, even if you have a million things on your to-do list, if you have white space on your calendar, what did you get distracted from? You have to know what you got distracted from in order to say you got distracted. Step number 3 is hacking back the external triggers. Even though they only account for 10% of our distractions, there's some very easy stuff that we can do to hack back these external triggers. And then step number 4 is preventing distraction with pacts, which is where we have some kind of firewall against distraction to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do. If you understand those 4 fundamental steps, anyone can become indistractable.
I like that part because I read digital minimalism, I tried digital detox, people were talking about meditation, tried everything, but nothing really worked for me. So the big question that I have for you is like, why is it not working? And what was really refreshing from your book was internal trigger. So time management is the pain management. And I was like, that's so true. And I do have this cell phone lock that didn't work. I'll break it. And I do have this dumb phone. It didn't work. And I need GPS. I need Slack when I go to dentist, for example, things like that. So nothing really worked in the long term. So let's talk about how to tame the internal trigger. That discomfort never gets easier. How do we tame that internal trigger?
Many of these tools, they're not bad. They're just recommended in the wrong order. So for example, you say, oh, I got a dumb phone, or I have a lockbox. Those aren't necessarily bad things. They can be helpful, but if you skip the first step of mastering internal triggers, you're going to do what you said, right? You break the lockbox. You figure out ways around things. Because the first step, if you don't understand the reason we get distracted, is that it is an emotion regulation problem. When you find yourself feeling a certain way, you will unconsciously go to find relief. That's what the brain does. The brain is a pattern matching device. That's what our brains do. They look for whatever solves a discomfort with the least amount of effort. That's what we will turn to. We look for whatever solves pain as quickly as possible. And so this is very important. We used to think that human motivation was about seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. It's not true. We know now, neurologically speaking, that everything we do for only one reason, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. Once you truly understand that, you understand that time management is pain management, weight management is pain management, money management is pain management, because all human behavior is pain management. And so what that will allow you to do is to understand when you are having trouble with a distraction, when you find yourself doing one thing when you said you were going to do something else, you can step back and say, wait a minute, it's just a feeling. It's just a feeling, right? And feelings are transitory. You can feel angry for a while, you can feel sad for a while, you can feel bored for a while, but these sensations come and go. So there are over a dozen different techniques in Indistractable that you can use, and some will work better for some people over others. A technique that I use almost every single day is called the 10-minute rule. And the 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction, whether it's checking your phone, whether it's smoking that cigarette, whether it's eating that chocolate cake if you're on a diet, whatever it is that you said you did not want to do, okay, for that period of time, you can give in to it. It's okay, but not right now. Not right now. In 10 minutes. So every day, I write. I'm a professional writer, and that's what I do every day. And writing is not easy. I've never figured out how to make it into a habit. That's bullshit, because habits are behaviors done with little or no conscious thought. You can't make something into a habit if it requires hard work. So when I'm writing, all I want to do is go check email or go look at the news or go do some research, which means, scrolling around Google or whatever. And so what I have to do is use this 10-minute rule to remind myself that I can give into that distraction, but not right now. I choose to delay when I can give into that distraction. So sometimes I'll sit down, I'll take a deep breath. I'll say, okay, what am I experiencing right now? And I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. And my job is to either get back to the task at hand. As soon as I'm ready, I can get back to the writing, or I'm allowed to, for 10 minutes, to surf that urge, to just experience that sensation. And so the idea here is that you're teaching yourself that these emotions are transitory, right? That they just last many times for just seconds. Although it feels to us, they trick us. When we feel bored, when we feel anxious, when we feel stressed, we think we're always going to feel that way. That's never the case. And so what I find is when I set a timer for just 10 minutes, let myself experience that sensation, and I repeat a few mantras to myself, right? Like one mantra I repeat all the time is, this is what it feels like to get better. This is what it feels like to get better. Acknowledging that those uncomfortable sensations are part of the process. I've learned to love the discomfort as opposed to wanting to escape it. What you will find is that 90% of the time, when the 10 minutes are up, you won't even notice. You'll be back at work on the thing you said you were going to do. Most importantly, you're teaching yourself that you have the agency, you have the power within you to delay that impulse. So the 10-minute rule becomes the 12-minute rule, becomes the 15-minute rule, becomes as long as you want it to be. Now, and don't push yourself. If you don't like the 10-minute rule, if that's too long, start with 2 minutes. I can give into that distraction in just 2 minutes, right? Start from whatever feels effortless to you, right? It's not about no pain, no gain. It's about learning to deal with that discomfort in a healthy way.
This is great, but I want to ask about how to bring up that awareness that you are avoiding this because you don't want to feel discomfort. For example, whenever I have to understand or study some hard statistical model, for example, my phone is there, and then it is almost seamless to make that transition to the phone. So I sometimes don't aware that, oh my gosh, I don't like to do the hard work, and let's give 10 minutes until I touch the phone, and let's sit down here and then do like simple meditation or surf with my emotion or craving there.
Yeah.
Sometimes that moment never comes to me. I just like touch the phone. I'll just go to the kitchen and start eating some snacks and things like that. So that pause, giving that pause is a start. And sometimes I fail to do that. Like, how do we cultivate the awareness if we just get started?
Right. So that's only step one. So the model is about these 4 steps, these 4 things we have to do. So step number 1, master the internal triggers. You need to have the tools to deal with that discomfort. But that's not all. Step number 2 is making time for traction. So do you have that time on your schedule when you have to study this statistical model? Is it booked on your schedule? Do you have that time? Are you like, oh, I'll get to it when I get to it? No. What I want you to do is most people, I don't know if you do this, but I used to use to-do lists for years. And it turns out that there's to-do lists are terrible for many reasons.
Let's talk about it after this, but I want to talk about this because I'm a big fan of to-do lists,
Yeah, it's not that writing things down on a piece of paper is a bad idea. That's great. Getting things out of your brain and putting them in a piece of paper or an app, wonderful. But the mistake people make is they don't go to step 2, which is putting it on your schedule. So if you wake up every morning with 100 things on your to-do list, and then you say, okay, I'll do this, this, and this, and this, what you do is you do the easy or the urgent, right? That's what we tend to do, is the easy stuff, the fun stuff, or the urgent stuff, not the stuff that's actually important to move our lives and careers forward. So if you say, hey, I have to work on this difficult statistical model, that's the most important thing, I want you to put 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever amount of time in your schedule. Because that is the only way to know the difference between traction and distraction. Traction is whatever you said you were going to do in advance. It has to be on your schedule. By the way, it can be studying a statistical model. It can be being with your kids. It can be playing video games. It can be checking social media. It doesn't matter. It needs to be on your schedule because you can't call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So that's step number 2. Now, step number 3, hacking back the external triggers. If you find that having your phone nearby is a temptation, well then, for that 30 minutes or an hour or whatever amount of time you scheduled, that phone it goes off before you even start, right? Maybe you put it in another room. Maybe it's on work mode. Maybe you're using a tool like Forest. Here, I'll show it to folks who are watching on screen. So you set this little timer for how much time you want to work for. And there's this cute little virtual tree. And if you pick up the phone, it says, the tree will get chopped down if you do anything with it. So that would be a great way to enter into a pact, the fourth step of the model, where there's some kind of pre-commitment you're making, where there's a consequence to not doing what you said you were going to do. A distractible person keeps getting distracted by the same things again and again, right? It's as Paulo Coelho said, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. The difference is an indistractable person says, okay, I see why I got distracted that one time. It's not going to happen again. Because there's only three reasons: an internal trigger, an external trigger, or a planning problem. And so I'm going to take steps today to prevent that from happening again in the future.
So I actually try your tips after I read your book. So what you said in the book is like plan the time for social media, for example. If you put like 30-minute blog in your calendar and then use that time to catch up on social media or checking email or do the web surfing and so on and so forth. And that's not distraction, that's planned. So I tried that. What was really hard for me is to get off because there is inertia and it's easy things, and when I try to go back to the hard thing again, my brain will say, nope, this is a lot easier and fun and you can stay here forever. How do you deal with that?
Perfect. Yeah, so let's walk through it. Okay, so you plan time in your schedule to go on social media. Did you put that time on your calendar?
Yes, 30 minutes. Then I'll go back to work.
Perfect. What did you use a pact? Did you use any kind of pre-commitment?
Pact component. Can we talk about that a little bit? How can we make a pact there, and then how can we bind that here? Yeah.
Exactly. So this is again, it's about these four steps in concert. So I also love social media, right? But there's this beautiful feature that comes built. Do you have an Apple or an Android?
Apple.
Apple. Perfect. You have Apple Screen Time, and it takes you maybe 30 seconds to put in a specification, which is what I have as well, that says 30 minutes of Instagram per day. After 30 minutes, I get a little thing that says, hey, you've been using it for your allotted time per day, right? And now I have to click an extra button to keep going. And I have something on my schedule that comes next, right? So again, it's these four steps in concert. If you pick and choose, this isn't a buffet. You can't pick and choose. You have to do 4 steps.
Neil, so I really liked your book, and big part of the reason is that you struggled and you know how this feels, getting frustrated and then trying different things but still going back to the distraction. What would you say biggest change you're experiencing after taming this? Just for motivating us. We just want to know that this is an effort that's worth making.
Yeah, it's I wrote the book for myself. I used to be clinically obese. I used to be very distractible. I'm embarrassed to say, when I was with my daughter, I would be checking my phone. And it's not that the device is the problem. It's that I didn't intend to do those things. And yet here I was doing something I didn't want to do. And that's really what this is all about. It's about living the kind of life that you don't regret. That's the goal here. When people talk about work-life balance and they talk about how do I, what are the regrets of the dying? How do I have the kind of life I want? The only way to have the life you're proud of, the kind of life that you look back and say, hey, I lived without regret, is to decide for each and every day how you want to spend that day in advance. Because if it's not this precise of here's how I want to spend my time according to my values, what are values? Values are attributes of the person you want to become. If you don't define your time by your values, you're going to look back and regret. And so what I advocate for is turning your values into time. There's no facet of my life that hasn't gotten better. I'm 45 years old. I used to be clinically obese. Today I'm in the best shape of my life. Not because I have some special willpower or I'm athletically, inclined. Not at all. It's just because I do what I say I'm going to do consistently. Right? I eat right when I say I will. I exercise when I say I will because I said I was going to. I'm more professionally productive. I spend more quality time with my family and friends. Again, it's not about doing anything special. We all know what to do. We all know what to do. It's about doing what you already know you should.